Welcome to another episode of. Damn, I accidentally hit my desk. Welcome to another episode of Hindsight 2020, a musical retrospective. In this podcast, we talk about albums that we think are significant, culturally significant, or that are era defining, and we just kind of get into why they were so great or why they were so important, and we just share our opinions on them. So this episode comes with a twist, and I'll explain that in a minute. First, let's get into our panel for the day. We have, as always, my co-host Arnold Trevino, aka Arnold from Texas, right here making hearts.
The
Uh,
man.
the man. We have our featured guest of the night. You may have seen our quick little interview with him a couple days ago. Musician extraordinaire, uh, Alex Leary, aka Jeet Suisses, of
Also lover of Steve Austin.
also
I got
lover of Stone Cold Steve Austin,
it.
of Good
Hell
Going
yeah.
and Chateau Lobby. Definitely check them out. And we have a last minute guest, and he's one of my favorite people, one of my favorite comedians,
Aw.
and future radio host, and ramen slanger,
Yeah.
Raymond Cabrera, aka Nervous Dolphin, on social media. How's
Yeah.
it going?
Going good. Yeah.
All right. So again, this is going to be a special episode, and I'll say why. The episode that we will be discussing today, I mean the album that we'll be discussing this episode, is Ceremony's Polarizing the L-Shaped Man. Ceremony is a Bay Area former hardcore slash power violence quintet who decided to turn uh, post punk on this album. Now, not only will we be discussing this album and its impact on the current musical landscape, but our guest here, Raymond Cabrera, has not heard this album. So normally, in every episode, we try to get guests who have researched the album, listened to it multiple times. This time, due to unforeseen circumstances, we have Raymond who hasn't heard it, and we're gonna try to gauge his reactions to what we're talking about and see if we can, uh, you know, get him to tell us whether he will be checking out this album or not after we go into this conversation.
Yeah.
Raymond, feel free to ask questions, ask for clarifications on stuff. You know, really push us on it because, especially
Yeah.
Alex. Alex said he did a shit ton of research.
Yeah.
Really?
Let's just
I love Ceremony just as a band, so
Yeah.
yeah.
just in general. But yeah, I'll give you guys the fun facts and stuff that's going along with it.
I feel like I
Alright,
should
okay,
do more research for my episode.
Yes. Next episode, we will talk about this a little bit more at the end, but let's tease it right now. Next episode, special guest will be Raymond Cabrera, and we will be discussing Carly Rae Jepsen's "Emotion," and I am very,
Yes.
very excited about that.
Hell yeah.
Best pop album.
All right,
Yeah.
definitely, it's definitely up there. So let's get into it. The L-Shaped Man by Ceremony. Again, Ceremony, former hardcore power violence band. This was their fifth album, released in 2015. Uh, it was released through Matador Records, which also houses Car Seat Headrest. I don't know
Yep.
if that had any sort of influence on the sound of this album, but yeah. So a polarizing album, started off as one of the most celebrated like hardcore bands in recent memory. And even though they had already started showing signs of going in a, uh, for lack of a better word, softer direction on their on their album before this on Zoo, I don't think anybody was really expecting them to go full on, Joy Division worship the way they did on the L-Shaped Man,
Yeah, living up
which
to their name.
yeah, living up to their name. They are named after a Joy Division song, after all. So before we get into the track by track dissection of the album, uh, Arnold, Alex, can we get like your overall thoughts on the album? Just like a quick little like, uh, you know,
Yeah. So Alex, you can go first.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting you say that like they started moving in that direction and we weren't really sure like what they were going to sound like after like Zoo and stuff, like nobody really saw this coming. Personally, I feel like I saw it coming. I think punk and hardcore music at that time was changing so drastically, especially with bands like Turnover, Citizen, and even like Ceremony being such a great example. Going from Ronert Park into Zoo and then into this album, like it was this gradual. They're changing their entire sound, but they just had to kind of ease into it. As far as the album goes, I do really enjoy it. I think it's great. I think the demo version of it is great. And I would highly recommend that if you are a fan of this album, I think you should also listen to the demos to just hear the contrast of, I think it kind of tells a little bit of a story of where their headspace was at, because there are some songs that are harder and some songs that are softer. And you definitely tell it, like it has like its own little tale in those songs. So.
Okay.
Well, I got into Ceremony like singing them at South by Southwest. I've always been a fan of hardcore power violence, and once they started changing it up with Zoo, I got into them more because I appreciate bands that will not sound the same on every album. I don't want the same like 5 beats on the next album and then the next and the next and the next. You always got to change it up. Just like you can't eat burgers every day. You got to have some pizza from time to time. I generally liked.
Yep. Okay.
I liked how they changed it up drastically, because it took you for a loop. Alex, I know you're saying you saw it coming. I kind of was like hoping for them to stick to this sound maybe a little longer or like not as different, but it was to me it was completely different than what I was expecting, and I appreciate that album. I also appreciate the album as part of the discography of Ceremony, and then I also see it as a solo album also, if you kind of get what I mean, that it's that different.
Yeah. So I definitely get that. I do also feel, for me, I like it contextually. I do like, it's like that whole adage that the most punk rock thing you can do is do the least punk thing. Like that totally, subvert expectations and go completely in a completely different direction. So in that regard, I do love this album. I love it as a statement. But what I do have to be honest with, at least maybe it's because it was their first foray into full-on post-punk, but it was a bit of a slog for me. It took me a while to get through a whole listen of the L-shaped man, to a point that I kind of had to separate it, into two different listenings. First half earlier in the day, leave it alone for a little bit, and then come back to the second half of the album, because at some point the tracks kind of bled together for me, and so that's why conceptually I love it. I love the story of what the album is as a statement, and I love the story within the album too. The concept of the album, it is a very it is a very good breakup record, and I feel like the music definitely does match the themes and the tone of the album, but I was just hoping for a little bit more variety. Some of the tracks really did blend together for me. Uh, Individually, every song is beautiful. I think, scattered across multiple playlists and stuff, I will always appreciate a song off of the L-Shaped Man. It just gets hard to listen to when I put them all together. I don't know if that was anybody else's listening experience. At least maybe the first go around. Alex, our resident ceremony expert, how did you feel the first time you heard L-Shaped Man?
Well, so I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of against it when it first came out. I remember one of my roommates when that album came out, he loved it, like he thought it was awesome, and I was very kind of like disappointed at first because I knew that music was changing and I knew that hardcore bands were changing and like what it meant to be punk was changing at that time, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, where generalized punk is like in a really good spot for the world right now. But I just feel as if it was just strange, becoming such a fan of Ceremony, knowing them as this, staple in the hardcore power violence, like, scene that like I kind of grew up in Jacksonville. Like that's how I found out who Ceremony was because they came and played Jacksonville. And like they played with hardcore bands, I mean, but as far as the just like that album, I do think it was good. I think it's really well done. I think their transition into this, post-punk emo-esque style of band. This is probably the best way they could have done it because, well, one, Ross, the singer, is actually a very intelligent man. Like he's an incredible poet. He's an incredible writer. Like he wants to write books. He already makes poetry books. So he is incredibly intelligent, and I feel like it didn't quite shine through in the older albums because like people would just associate being dumb and punk. Like you're in a punk band, you're dumb. Like you're into hardcore bands, you do stage dives and you backflip and hurt yourself or whatever. Like nobody wants to hear that. Yeah. So I think that his intelligence really gets to shine since they transitioned into this style of band. Which is great. And it took me a while, like to kind of get around and really dig into the album and finally realize like, oh, wow, like this is like a lot of what this, it sort of became more of like, this was like Ross's band, I guess, because so much of himself was put into it, so much more was put into it, just like with his poetry and really emphasizing like feelings and stuff. Because obviously if you read through a lot of the older albums or even the older EPs, they just sing about a lot of different stuff. Like this is like one of the first times that they really got into, like shame and sadness and really trying to get away from like a one individual person who's hurt you a bunch. So that's just kind of where I guess I stand on it. Like I do think the album's really good as far as, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I definitely I did get that vibe, but I feel like there have been like flashes of Ross's, lyrical ability, even in the hardcore stuff. Like I think one of the most quotable songs, or one of the most quotable Ceremony lines ever, was from Cursed. Your fistful of hate, take a swing at the world. That's
Yeah.
fucking. It's angry, but that's fucking poetry, man. That's
Yeah.
not some meathead shit. That that's a thinking man's rage. You know what I mean? But it definitely does show through a lot more on this album. So I do give you that. So let's get into the track by track discussions. Opening track, Hibernation. I do love the fucking dreary ass piano melody that opens up the song, that opens up the album. I think that right off the bat, that was one of the highlights of the album for me. I think it set a tone. It really communicated to me just how dark this album was gonna be. Uh, but yeah, I don't know if there's a lot more that I could. I was so captivated right off the bat. It really set the mood for what the album was gonna be like. But yeah, what do you guys think about it? Hibernation.
I think it's a great intro into the album. But when you go into the rest of the album, it kind of like you can kind of tell, hey, maybe is like if you weren't knowledgeable of the track listing, this could have been either in the middle or the end or somewhere, like somewhere around there. So, but I do like that they went with this dreary opening for the album, and as seasoned listeners to Ceremony, you're kind of like, okay, well maybe they'll change it up in the next one, back to like something I'm familiar with, but they kind of just have this mood throughout, and I appreciate that. Lyric wise, like I have to most of the songs I had to actually look up the lyrics and be like, all right, like I got to deconstruct this in like, cause I'm like a visual learner. I'm not really auditory learner. So I had to like deconstruct this by looking at this and reading it. And I like that Ross went on Genius and gave his explanations on all the songs or most all the songs. So it kind of made it easier for me, but it's also like, am I taking English 101 again? Like, so is that? I feel like that's is it on me or is it on the art? And I feel like it's more me.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So don't like feeling like a song is also like a homework assignment too. I'm
Yes.
guessing that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I didn't expect the album to have that.
I get that. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, thoughts on opening track Hibernation?
So I agree that I think it definitely sets the tone for the album. Like if you had, I can only imagine like if you had pre-ordered the record and was just like had these huge expectations, and then you're putting it on for the first time, and then you're just kind of like, what is this? Like what am I about to get into? And I think this kind of sets the stage well. I definitely love the lyrics. I just like immediately I feel like it's just telling a picture of just like a sad individual, like just the lines of close your eyes to faith, shame and denial, like, just immediately just being like, that in itself, those few words tell so much of a story of one person, so I definitely think it sets the stage well. I think it's a good opening track, definitely one of the better intros of just any band in general, really, because they didn't just kind of take a cheap cop out and turn all their pedal effects all the way up and then just let it like reverberate into crazy hell. They like really thought about it and was like, we're going to do a nice piano, well thought out lyrics, which ultimately maybe the lyrics are a little too well thought out, going to that point. But I do think that ultimately it will always, like all those lyrics and all those things, like with any artist, they're always going to be more to the artist. And they're always going to have such a longer story to tell, because I'm sure if we had the opportunity to sit down with Ross and ask him about, his life and his stories and why he wrote these albums, it would be hours worth of conversation, something you couldn't just do in one sitting.
Yeah, 100%. I do. I love the lyrics to this. I definitely. I also get the feeling that Arnold brings up. It does kind of feel like a homework assignment at some points, to kind of dissect the track lyrically. But I do agree. It is possibly one of the better openers for not just the Ceremony album, just an album in general. It really does a great job of setting the tone. Let's check in with Raymond. Just hearing these vague comments on this intro track, are you gonna look this one up?
I do love a good piano, so yeah, I'll probably look it up.
All right, cool. A nice little dreary piano ballad.
Yeah.
You can say no, it's not really a ballad, just like a dreary piano intro. Next in the track listing, we've got Exit Fears. Thoughts on the track, guys?
You want to go, Arnold? Or?
Alex looks like he's like confident.
I got the lyrics pulled up. I'm ready. Like,
yeah, go for it.
Well, okay, so there's so much about actually this track in particular that I love. Just like some of the lines in it, like just like the pains will leave in the night, memories return in the light, no one would find out. Just like so many different things about it, because one, like from all the interviews that I've watched of Ceremony, they're very open about I don't know, like the polite way of saying this, but like they're very open about the drugs that they do, like they talk a lot about like, experimenting with drugs and like addictive drugs and what was the hardest thing for them to get off of and stuff, which, probably sounds strange. But I think this song helps tell kind of like a little bit of a story of some of their experiences, just like things like it started as a way to get by. You thought you'd survive through. You were lonely and wanted to die. That's just a weight you confide. you know, just like finding like crutches and different things that kind of push you along in your daily life. And just like, you know, like it is a weird dynamic talking about it, because I feel like drugs is kind of a hard topic, especially for a lot of people. But I think it's interesting that they kind of take on that topic and talk about, you know, like this is like the experiences that we had and some of the things we feel towards them and stuff. So I think it's very interesting. I like it a lot. I actually would say this is probably one of my more favorite tracks on the album.
I do like the ending.
Okay.
Bar, you know, but nothing in the world survives. Nothing ever feels right. But you have to tell yourself you tried.
Yeah.
That kind of like plays into the, like humans that like us ourselves. Like you always have to try. But you know, no matter what you do, like, is it really the right thing that you're doing? Like, so it's kind of like a pessimistic start of that line and to more of optimistic, but within that same like bar, which I kind of like. But you know, it's me again reading into this stuff.
Okay, yeah, I do. What I enjoy about this track is bringing up the themes of drug abuse that Alex brought up. I do love the. I mean, I don't know if subtlety would be the correct word to use, but I like that. You know, as much as you know, it conveys how grave of a situation it is to be, you know, using drugs. It doesn't paint you. It doesn't paint it for you in an overly dramatic way. It kind of keeps it, despite the subject matter, it keeps itself very grounded to the point that you know you don't roll your eyes at it. And musically speaking, I guess since at this point you know it's the beginning of the album, it's definitely a highlight for me. It's a great follow up to Hibernation, and I really love how sour the guitar riffs are on this one. You know, like it sounds very pessimistic, and you know, just like the overall feeling of how, like you know, the dreariness of the album is like all encompassing on this track. You know, almost kind of puts you in a headspace of what it would be like to be a an avid drug user. You know, like it almost puts you in that hazy place, and it's so overwhelming. It's yeah, like the guitar tones and everything are not so much musically heavy, but they do kind of carry this emotional weight to them. So I definitely do enjoy this track a lot. You know, it's definitely one of my favorites on the album as well. Uh, Again, let's do the Raymond check-in.
Actually, I have a question. So
Mm-hmm.
you're over here mentioning like the drug use or the mentioning of drug use in the song, and then you mentioned before that this is a post-punk album. So the first thing that kind of popped up in my head was the first Idols album. I don't know if any of you guys listened to Brutalism before, but
I haven't heard it.
Brutalism's one of my favorite albums. It's really good. But the thing I like about Brutalism is that there's a really dirty feeling whenever they talk about drug use. Almost like, I don't know if you've ever seen Trainspotting.
Oh, love that movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like that. Like it's like the exact feeling of like Trainspotting, but in an album. Does this album kind of have the same feeling whenever you listen to it, or is it like a different feeling? And this is totally like personal opinion. I just want to know what you personally feel whenever you listen to this track.
Well, I mean, for me, when I listen to it, I mean, yeah, it does have sort of like, I mean, when I watch Trainspotting, because I do love that movie, I mean, it was like a very depressing, you know, kind of like realization, like, man, like people live like this, like people do this, you know, like that's these are like some lifestyles of real people. Yeah, I mean, I actually think that's a great contrast. Definitely like listening to the, like even just this album as a whole, you know, just like going through the different tracks and hearing some of the sadder things, or like how, you know, whoever this person is that they're talking about, how they're living, just kind of getting an idea of that and just being like, wow, like this is real. This is real life. This isn't some, just like made up little quip that he just was like, oh, these are some cool lyrics and I'm just going to throw it out there,
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I do get like that sense of like dreariness from this track. I don't know if I would call it like a dirty feeling. Like when I watch Trainspotting, there is like an element of like voyeurism, like you're looking into somebody's most
Okay.
vulnerable moment. That I definitely do catch that vibe in this song.
Yeah.
Arnold,
Yeah.
what do you think?
I kind of see it like this is a drug use or like an addiction due to a heartbreak, and like this album is a heartbreak.
Okay.
So I don't see it as dirty, I kind of see it as like this is a crutch that I need to get through this like part of my life, and I don't kind of see that as dirty. I kind of see that as very dependent.
Okay.
Yeah, if you, it's like this. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was just trying to see exactly gauge like what the feeling of the album was, because whenever you brutalism, it's like a very like dirty sounding album in a way, like just like the lyrics, and I don't know, maybe at some point we'll talk about it. But yeah, that's just whenever I think of post punk, I think of that album.
This is like a not like black tar heroin dirty, more like alcoholism and like maybe some pills like dirty.
That makes sense. Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
That's still not good, but it's slightly better.
Could be worse.
Yeah, it could be worse.
I feel like the lyrics in this song do a really good job of keeping it from being like a very visceral type of gritty. Like it's not, like I said, I guess to contrast it to Trainspotting, like it's not vulgar. I guess it doesn't show you like the vulgar side of what the lifestyle is, but it is very sincere. So you do get like the sadness of it, and not so much the like, look how low I've stooped,
Oh, that makes sense.
Societally, but so excellent track, honestly. And from here we move on to Bleeder. Thoughts on Bleeder, you guys?
I like this song musically. Like it's catchy. It draws me immediately. I would say that. Easy to listen to. Going through the lyrics, I like that it's kind of like now, like you see, it's like how you had a breakup. I'm pretty sure a lot of us have had breakups, at least one, and you're just kind of like in this kind of like limbo, and then you're and a little bit of like careless as well to like the things around you. So I like that, the lyrical aspect in that, and the catchiness of the song. I like it. It's a good song. Probably one of my preferred ones in this album. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Alex.
Yeah. So I do like this song. I think I actually prefer the lyrics over the instruments on this song. Not that the instruments are bad or how the song was written is bad, because I think it is well done. I just feel it is very repetitive, which also is like 90% of today's music is like a lot of repetitiveness. Like a lot of stuff that gets on the radio is very repetitive. Which, like, I mean, it's a good track to drive to for sure. Like if you just want to ride out, just like kill it, like, and just let it ride. That's cool. But I just like knowing them and knowing that they have like so much talent, like especially hearing like even just from past albums of like how fresh they can keep punk music and how fresh they can keep hardcore music, like when they were writing songs. I just think it was interesting that this is like sort of what they kind of fell on and was like, okay, well, like we're gonna do this. And when they go through that whole section towards like the end of the song where they just keep saying bleeder over and over, and it's just bleeder, just back to back. Like I don't know. It almost seems like that's kind of the obvious thing to do. Like, yeah, of course that's how you write a song, which makes sense, and it is good. But ultimately, I guess I was kind of hoping for more from it, especially with how good the lyrics are. Yeah, like going back to the point of this is definitely has to be some sort of breakup, or at least some sort of loss of somebody they at least desperately care about. And even emphasizing like no one was there, no one heard, like that is like such a great lyric, just like talking about screaming in your room and stuff, just because like that's kind of how you feel during those times, like you feel as if no one hears you and no one's really there.
Yeah. uh the what I like about this track is that it's one of the few tracks to me that feel like it has like a subtle nod to the fact that they were at some point a punk band. Like I feel like the instrumentation does kind of like dangle that fact in front. There's like a punk edge to what they're doing almost, and I do enjoy that a lot because I enjoy that on two levels. One, I just love I love punk music, so I like like my ears kind of perked up hearing like the song that was a little bit more rough around the edges, had a little bit more of that edge to it. But again, going back to the other reason I love this song is going back to where this album is in context to the band's trajectory. I feel like putting a song that toys with the idea of being a punk song, I can't help but feel like maybe like the band members kind of did that knowing that they were gonna get people riled up. Like, oh shit, here it is. Like, we've been listening to all these post-punk tracks, and that was just a joke. Now they're gonna come in with the hard shit, and they don't. You know what I mean? Like, we're kind of like, they're like, nah, just kidding. Here's some more sad songs. Do you guys know about Ian Curtis? And then just like, uh, so I don't know if that's true or not, but that's how it reads to me instrumentally. So that really just makes me enjoy it even more. Just the subtle nods to punk that are kind of hidden within a not even hidden, but just very subtly woven through Bleeder makes it a really fun track in my opinion. It's one that I definitely do enjoy. Uh, I feel like this is gonna become, the order of things how we do this on this episode. Let's do the Raymond check-in. Uh, Based on these vague descriptions, what are your thoughts?
Sounds like an interesting track. I don't really have much to report about this one. Yeah.
Fair, fair. Next up, actually one of my favorite songs, but also it's a double-edged sword for me on this one. We're moving on to Your Life in France. I'll let you guys take the stage on this one. Thoughts on Your Life in France?
Go ahead, Alex.
Okay, I'll go. Yeah, this is actually I've loved this song. This is like if I pull up the album on Spotify, it's probably like one of the first songs I'll click on, just because like I just have like good memories with it. Like when I first heard it, and just like I really like the lyrics of it, but I really like also sort of the fact that like I'm not sure which person he's talking about in this, which like, we're sort of on this theme of sort of like a drug abuse, depressing like person that I feel like he's, kind of referencing and mentioning throughout the album. And then in this track in particular, I almost wonder if he is talking about the person that like did the breaking up, or like was responsible for hurting another individual. Just because it just seems so not necessarily vague, but just like talking about a completely different situation. And it doesn't sound as sad as the other songs as far as the lyrics go. Just because there is so many like things that just sound like redemption, just like people you love, places you saw, portions are gone, just strange things like just talking about sitting on the patio and just listening to like, the splash from Icarus falling from the sky, like just not really emphasizing how sad or how, you know, depressed the other individual of like this album really is. But I definitely enjoy the song. I mean, definitely a go-to track for me.
All right, okay, Arnold.
I do like this track musically and lyrically. I do like the end point that he has of the people you love, places you saw. Portions are gone. Like it's kind of like you're remembering, you know, your memories and the people that were there. Like you kind of have to like forget about them because they'll bring up bad memories that you know ended up. So you kind of have to just remember the good parts. So you're gonna be like, yeah, I remember I've been in France, but then you kind of don't want to remember who you were there with and or the person, yeah, so who the person you're with, because then it's going to kind of bring you in a mood. So this is, I feel like here's the points where like he starts doing in his songs more noticeably. Ross is writing out like these like a thesis to every song at the end. I kind
Oh,
I and that's like most of the albums kind of like that. He'll have like the last line will always be like a sort of summary of what you just listened to. But here is also the issue with this song was this is the one I had, this was the one that made me like, all right, time to do homework, because you know like it's like, okay, you were selfishly aware of things you couldn't change. It's like, am I supposed to understand that? Like, and writing in, he's just like, oh yeah, we were just when I was in France, like we started being touristy or acting like this or whatever. And I was like, hey, I was like, okay, so I had to like seek my teacher for this. um so doesn't make it easy for you lyrically, but it doesn't, like, I do like the song. The instruments work great. I do like how this kind of ties into the next song also.
Okay.
Hmm.
Um, I do like how this is kind of uh, like a reprieve from the overall dreariness of the rest of the album. The instrumentation is a little bit bouncier. The lyrics aren't as hopeless in this album. As a matter of fact, some of the lyrics paint a very serene picture, just like uh, you know, uh, yeah, the whole sat down in the patio, watched the cars go by, all that stuff. So I do love this track. I think it was a needed palate cleanser because you've been getting hit with just like sad song after sad song after sad song, and then you get this song that isn't necessarily happy, but it's a more optimistic cut than everything that's preceded it thus far. But uh, this is where I mainly notice the point, which is my biggest point of contention with the album, which is like this overall sameness, like this huge sense of uniformity through all the tracks. I won't say what song. We'll get into that when we get to that song. But before, like, if I'm not actively listening to this album, like if I start singing this song in my head, I'll start with a verse from here and I end up singing the chorus to another song because they sound so fucking similar. Like, and it was mainly beginning with this track that I started to notice that holy shit, at some point these tracks kind of bleed together, and not in a way that I would consider entirely positive. It's not, that's where I start noticing an issue with like yeah, there's a such an overwhelming sameness sonically in the album where I feel like it could have definitely benefited from some more diversity in the instrumentation and how they work with it. But I mean, as far as songs to sound like, as far as songs that become the unofficial blueprint for the rest of the album, this is not a bad one. If like every song from here on out kind of sounding like this one could be worse. This is a really good song. I like it a lot. But yeah, this is the song that really started putting it in my head that yeah, there is a very strong sonic similarity amongst the tracks on this album. Did any of you ever, feel the same way, or is it just me?
I felt there was a sameness like throughout the album. Not like every part of the album, but definitely there's like there's not so subtle similarities at times.
Yeah, I feel like there's in particular just one track that when we get to it, I'll sort of give more like how I feel about it. But there is one track in particular I feel just really stands out in on the album in a very strange way, and I feel like most of the songs make sense besides that one track, like being on this album.
All right, cool. Let's do the Raymond check-in. Raymond, your life in France. From what you've heard us say, what do you think?
I think I like the idea that Arnold presented, where it was a thesis at the end of every track, at least at the end of this track.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. I think there was one album that I can't name right now that had that sort of idea. Um, but I really like albums that have that sort of connection where they kind of like piece together every song through some sort of weird, uh, just whatever, some sort of verse. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's cool.
Okay, cool. So that was the Raymond check-in for your
Yeah.
life in France. Up next, we got companion track, Your Life in America. Let's get into thoughts on Your Life in America.
You want to go again?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, all
you're,
right.
you're,
I
you're,
guess
you're
this is
yeah,
the roundabout way that we're
yeah.
going. Um, I do I do like this song a lot, particularly because of. Have you guys listened to Ronert Park by Ceremony? That
Yeah.
album.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I do like this track a lot, just particularly because of that song "Sick." You know, just talking about like sick of living in America, sick of mass hysteria, sick of the GOP, like just so much stuff that like he's just like so sick and tired of. And then this song is like, I mean, it already starts off like you don't want to leave from here, tied to the pain of the passing years. You know, it's like of course he doesn't want to leave, but like he's kind of stuck, you know, like tied to the
Mm-hmm.
pain. Like I kind of like that contrast of it, you know, like none of us really want to leave America. You know, I don't know, maybe I particularly don't.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you know, I just thought that was a very interesting thing to say, especially just coming from just a few albums ago, how politically like enraged they were by so much of what like America is doing. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think this is a really cool song, just for the fact of like it's kind of just like short and sweet, and like even just the lyrics. I mean, it's you know not a whole lot to look at, but I feel like it does kind of tell a lot about like what is there.
Mm-hmm. I can see the same like I share the same sentiment, like the whole you don't want to leave here, but you kind of don't like some certain aspects. Um, but you know, just because you're so comfortable with it, you know it by heart. It you just want to stay because that's where you've been, and yeah, you can appreciate other places, but ultimately, like this is your home because you've been here for so long.
Yeah, I want to say I think this is one of the this is like the track where I think we all kind of share the same sentiment about it. That is definitely what I got them, especially like yeah, juxtaposed with your life in France, and then you get your life in America. Definitely does have that feeling of an almost not so much resentful like I'm staying here because like I don't know anything else, but it is like that feeling of like I would love to leave, but I also like where would I go? You know, that's kind of like that kind of mentality. So we definitely do get a lot of that. I feel like musically, this is one of the tracks that didn't do too much for me. I think at this point, I I was just kind of getting like the novelty of a ceremony post punk album kind of started to wear off on me a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
this is we're nearing the point of the record where I started to realize maybe I have to split this into two listens. But before I did, break it up, I listened to one more song. Oh, sorry. Uh, Raymond Check-In. We didn't say a lot about this one, but what do you think?
I like the idea of not wanting to live in America. So that's a interesting track. That's all I got.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what most of us got from it.
Mhm.
And here is the next track. This is one that I kind of alluded to, so I might speak on this first before Alex does. Uh, the Separation. So this is the track that I alluded to when I was talking about Your Life in France. I'll start singing the opening lines to Your Life in France, kind of going about that lyric. And when, come the chorus, I'm singing the chorus to this song. I'm just repeating, Can You Measure the Loss over and over and over. And it's not until I actually listen to both songs that I'm like, holy shit, they're separate songs. They're not the same track. So uh, again, given the sonic similarities to Your Life in France, musically, I absolutely love The Separation. I think it's probably the superior track of the two. I think it is a little bit, tiny bit more instrumentally diverse, uh, with like the keyboards thrown in there and stuff. But yeah, what stops me from enjoying this song to the fullest is again the nodding feeling in my head that this feels like Your Life in France to me. Like there's very little separating the two tracks. I don't know if I'm the only one that felt that way. Alex, what do you think?
I definitely agree with you in the fact that they sound so similar. But I do think that the Separation is the superior track. And I do also think that I mean I would even go to say that the Separation is probably my favorite track on this album. Because I mean it's something that as soon as I hear it, I'm just like I get like excited to listen to it, just
Yeah,
because I really like the way it feels. There's it's like brilliant in the aspect that it makes you want more from the song because there is really just about like I don't know, not a whole lot of wordage to it. I mean, it is very repetitive. It is very, a lot of the same lyrics, but it tells a story in that short amount of time. But just because of the music itself and how well they laid it out, like it feels really good to just listen to, in my opinion.
I
yeah,
w- I will say that this is probably my favorite song out of the album, and if it was like if I can only have one song to listen to in this entire album, this would be it. Um, just both on like it musically and also me easily understanding it. Can you measure the loss? It's like he's questioning us and himself of like losing a relationship. Is there any sort of measure that you can put to that, like to where you'll feel better, or like what all the time that you spent on it? Can you even measure that out? And the obvious answer is no. But science does say it's 2 times as many years as you spent in the relationship. Just to throw in a study. Um, and also like the beginning aspect is like pieces of time thrown from the bow. I'm just like, oh, bow of the ship, the relationship. Thank you. This is easy for me to understand. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, like that's I appreciate the song just because of its ease, its simplicity, and then also its instrumentals. And I favorite track.
it really messed with me right now. Alex mentioning how lyrically brief it is,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a testament to how good the song is. I didn't realize
Yeah.
how how little lyrics there actually are. It feels like a much fuller song,
Yep.
and it's just a testament to just how fucking good it is. Like Arnold said, if I could only listen to one song off of this album, like forever, like just one, it would probably be The Separation. This is definitely the high point of the album. Like I said, the only thing that bothers me about it is just the nagging feeling that it sounds so much like Your Life in France. I wish I could just kind of take that out of my head so I could enjoy this song to its fullest. But the two songs kind of bleed together for me, and but that's the only complaint I have about it. As a standalone track, uh, I love it. Like Alex said, I get excited to hear this song. I hear this song and I forget how I feel about the rest of the album. Like I get excited
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
listen to the whole record, just
Yep.
listening to this one song. Okay, we really sang this song its praises. Let's see what's going on the Raymond check-in. Raymond, the separation.
I think it sounds good. That's all I got.
I think that should be the first song you listen to. If you decide to check out this album, it goes straight to the separation. I think that would
Really?
be
Mhm.
that
Okay.
would that's my suggestion. I mean, I don't know if the rest of the group agrees, but if it were me and I would go
I
to
would
that.
say so. I would say do that.
Okay.
I would go. I would say so, yes, because it's a great song. But there's the added risk of the rest of the album not measuring up to how
Yeah,
great the separation
Can you
is.
measure it?
can you measure it? Yeah.
Arnold with the jokes here.
Mhm.
All right, the next song, the pattern. Opening thoughts on this one? We'll go Alex since it's been the default rotation.
You know what? And I hope I don't hurt anyone's feelings by saying this. This is probably my least favorite track. This song I like it lyrically. I think musically, like just being a musician and hearing almost how sloppy and how just almost careless the drummer is playing, it like kind of irks me. Like it kind of bothers me. I'm like, man, this is the take that you wanted. Like you didn't want to retrack that or redo any of it. Like this is the one, huh? Like you settled on this. But I think lyrically it's great. I think lyrically it's kind of talking. I mean, at least from what I interpreted, like it kind of sounds like almost like speaking about like a drug dealer. Like talking about he taught you how to see again. He'll always be your friend. Those early years felt so unclean. Just kind of like talking about like the old familiar. Like it's like as if your dealer never changes over the years. He's just an old familiar friend, even if it's a different person. So I don't know. That's kind of what I took from it, but definitely musically, I skip it. I mean, just being honest, because after listening to it so many times, like I would just, I used to just let this album ride at my old job. And every time this song came on, I was like, man, I just am not impressed with this.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I can see like skipping this song. I definitely would skip this song too. I feel like this is where the song that starts where the album kind of drops for me. It kind of just like becomes not as great as that great of a quality. I don't know if they like put less time into these last few tracks, but they definitely don't work for the album. I guess they work, but I can honestly do without. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
really like this song.
I definitely feel the same way about this song, the pattern. Uh, I do definitely agree with Alex on the sloppiness, performance wise on this song. I think when I first listened to it, I wanted to trick myself into believing that it was like another bleeder situation when you're kind of like, oh, they're kind of showing that punk rock edge. But this late into the album, even if they did, I don't think it would do anything for it. So the only like I can't trick myself into believing that this was, a calculated move to, you know, go about it the way they did. So yeah, this is a skipper, 100%. Uh, sorry if any of our listeners enjoy this track, but it's also I can't help but feel like its placement right after the separation really hurts it.
Yeah,
You know,
that
have
song
this
is
song
it's
right
hard to
after the best song on the album
yeah
didn't have
hard
a chance.
hard to have
Well,
a good continuing song.
So you're saying I
well,
should start at this track
yeah.
and then move on?
Yeah, set the bar so low with this song
Yeah,
that everything else just exceeds it.
nice.
So I think that was our Raymond check-in.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting near the end here. We've got Root of the World. I actually really like Root of the World, but let's hear what Alex has to say.
So I also love this song, but this is the track I was talking about that does not belong on this album, in my opinion. I definitely believe that this sounds like a song that they may have written when they were writing Ronert Park or writing Zoo or something, or maybe this was just kind of like keeping the nostalgia of like being that punk hardcore kind of style of band. Just because like when he starts getting real guttural and real screamy, you hear that old style of Ceremony coming out of it. You know, you feel it. And like I highly recommend, there's some awesome videos online. Like if you just put in Root of the World like live, it's awesome watching people just going from, you know, they're playing all these softer post-punk tracks and then people just go nuts for this song. Like they just start stage diving and climbing on people. It's incredible. But I think it is a great testament to just show like, hey, we're still punk, we're still hardcore. Like even the lyrics in this song, like poisoning the body distracts the mind from what it needs. That sounds like old Ceremony, in my opinion. That sounds like a power violence band talking about like, you know, drugs and like, yeah, poison the body, distract the mind, you know. But I do love this track. I just don't think it belongs with this album.
Okay.
I agree with that. I can see that this as an old school like Ceremony song that's kind of like say like they were doing these songs in high school and then like once you graduated, you're in college and you finish college, you look back at it and you're like, can I do a song like this again? And this is kind of like what you would get like after a bit of an experience and seeing other things for a minute, coming back to this. It's like doing old Ceremony but with some more experience. So I get that, and you know, I see this more as like a song where he's kind of like showing the flaws in this girlfriend that he had. So maybe this is the anger part of the acceptance of the breakup. You know, like he's saying like, well, like you're chewing your fingers to get the quick with the intimacy of a cigarette. You know, you couldn't sleep, you couldn't eat, like, and then he states in Genius that it's like his ex-girlfriend was a chain smoker. So it's like it's kind of like him kind of like telling himself like, no, she wasn't that good because of this and this and this. So
one thing I also wanted to say about this track in particular, I know I sort of brought it up. There is like the L-shaped demo version of this album that I don't know if it's on Apple Music or wherever, but it is on Spotify.
Yeah.
And the demo version of this song is completely different. He sings it super somber, super soft. There's no screaming, there's no yelling. It's more of like a bass and drum, you know, kind of driven song with like this soft singing behind it. So it's really interesting to listen to both. I mean, I would highly recommend if you get the chance to listen to both versions of the song to kind of see how the dynamic of how it changed. And I think it's odd that they decided to end up with the more screamy, yelly version of this song for the actual album.
Yeah, I feel like I need to check out the demo version, but I think this song was the shot in the arm. The album needed this late in its track listing. Uh, does it fit the overall aesthetic of the album? Uh, no, not really, but I think that's why it stands out and why I love it so much. Root of the World is so fucking cathartic. And I do feel that, like, contextually in the story of the album, like Arnold said, this is the moment where you're kind of like angry. You know, I think we all go through that. You know, I think once the initial depression of a breakup wears off, you kind of allow yourself to be angry and, you know, just say the things that you wouldn't say, I guess. You know, like you allow yourself to be mad and be so visceral. And that happening on this track was great. I think I saw them live leading up to the release of this album. I think I saw them at South by Southwest leading up to the release of this album, and they ended up playing this song. I believe. I think it was like a teaser to what was gonna happen. And yeah, I remember even then, without having, you know, the somber songs following it up, and then, you know, turning into, you know, a heavy song. You know, just just riding the pure momentum of the zoo material and everything, and then they get into this entirely new track. Like I don't believe anyone had heard it in that crowd up until that point. They busted this song out, and yeah, dude, it was fucking nuts. It was
Yep.
it was crazy. It was one of those instances. Arnold has been there, like one of the many instances that I've gotten my glasses broken at a hardcore show.
Uh,
Definitely happened during this song.
Yeah. Well, I got a good memory that about ceremony that like I will say at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
After that, we're nearing the end of the album. We've got uh, three more tracks left. Now we've got the party. Thoughts on the party? We'll go, Alex.
I really enjoy the song. I definitely think once again this one was like really well written, as far as like just writing good hooks and instrumentally. I really enjoyed it. I feel like the lyrics I do like them, but it just there are some little things about it that I just feel like just just hearing how clever and how particular his wordage was in so many other songs, and this song kind of I feel just tells the story more linear compared to just like kind of giving you that mystery. It's kind of like a good thing and a bad thing, in my opinion. It's it's good because it's easy to follow, but it's also bad because it's like, well, I kind of want that mystery, and I kind of want to see and hear how clever you can be, But I do like the song. I think it's good. Kind of more of a like a forgettable track for me. But I will say that when I listen to this song when I'm driving, like if I'm driving alone at night, which like a lot of my job was driving at night, my old job was driving at night. When it would get to this song and it would do the "someone's behind you" part, I would get almost like this eerie feeling, because I'd just be driving at night and there's not that many people on the road, and he's pretty much whispering, "someone's behind you," and it's like it's kind of spooky. So I do like that. I think that's cool. I think that's a nice little touch for the end of the track.
All right. Arnold.
Yeah, so this song I kind of got like a lot of remnants of like when I started listening to Joy Division, especially at the end. That like real kind of like dreary, spooky-ish vibes, like when you first kind of introduced to them, because I was coming off from like just like straight old school punk, and then like someone told me to listen to Joy Division. I kind of get hints of that here, so it's kind of like where kind of like if Ian Curtis was able to like uh, be revived and can make a song again. So I kind of appreciate the song, but at the same time, like you're not Joy Division, so like should you be doing this? But I'd say this album's like lukewarm to like moderately positive for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this is the song definitely where Joy Division worship is on full display. You know, it was definitely, they wore it really boldly on their sleeve throughout the rest of the album, but of uh, there was enough of their own take on post punk that it was a ceremony album, a post punk ceremony album. I feel like this is the song where it did feel like yeah, it could have been a Joy Division B side. Tell me it was a lost Joy Division demo, and I wouldn't have doubted it. You know, so yeah, it is a little forgettable in the sense that it is, yeah, it is a straight up Joy Division song on a ceremony album. So uh, that is my main issue with it. And I realized on the last track we didn't do a Raymond check-in, so we're doing two Raymond check-ins on this one, for Root of the World and the Party.
Root of the World sounds like an interesting track. As for the party, I haven't really listened to Joy Division, so I don't really have much of a comparison to do that to, but I'll definitely check out Root of the World.
All right, yeah, that
Yeah.
seems like a sensible choice. And we're down to the last two tracks. We've got first and foremost, we've got the bridge. Alex, thoughts on the bridge?
So this track, it actually, I mean, even just like the last part of this album, like these last two tracks, I like the bridge. I think it's good. It is more of a forgettable song for me. The only part that really kind of grasped like my attention is the lyrics where he says, "Why do you break sometimes when you're alone? Is it the feeling of heavy loss? You don't think about her anymore, but you still lie." That is really just the most particular thing that I like about this song. I do kind of have more of a lukewarm feeling towards this track, especially compared to some of the other songs that were just so good. And then kind of getting to like the end of the album, where sometimes bands write really good songs closer to the end of the album, and then other times it kind of seems like they may have phoned it in,
Yeah. Arnold, thoughts on the bridge?
The first part, like the first half of this song, is kind of just like, I don't know what the fuck you're saying. Kind of talks about a man with a wooden arm.
Yeah.
Nice.
Being under a bridge. And it's like, okay, like, and online, like, he didn't fucking help on Genius. Like, so it's like the curtains are blue, but were they really blue? I'd say like first half of the song is kind of just like lyrically pretty. Music wise, it is just like another song. I do like the parts where Alex was mentioning, that second half is like, you break when you're alone, you still lie. Kind of reminds me of a John Waite song where the whole time it's the song I Ain't Missing You. And the whole song, he's like, I ain't missing you at all. And then at the end, he's like, I'm lying to myself. I ain't missing you at all. I am lying to myself. So it's like that whole time he was missing this person, but kind of like it's a breakup, it's a breakup album. This is probably the part of the breakup where it's like, yeah, I'm pretty over it. But then someone mentions like, hey, what happened to this person? You kind of get like a little teary eyed, or like you kind of feel like this like pit in your stomach, and or like your heart pounds a little differently. So it's like, are you really over it type thing. So
yeah.
First half good,
Yeah.
second half mid.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I do much prefer, lyrically speaking, the second half of the song over to the first half. This does feel like they couldn't really stick the landing on this album. I feel like it did kind of start to fizzle out closer to this part of the album. Um, yeah, I don't really have a lot of thoughts on this one. This one was a little forgettable for me. Let's do the Raymond check-in. On the bridge.
I'll probably listen to this track whenever I listen to the entire album.
Okay.
But other than that, it sounds like it's been a pretty forgettable. So, yeah.
All right.
Fair. And with that, we've made it to the end of the album, guys. The understanding. I do want to get to the impact of the album. So instead of going in detail with this song, since we're all kind of having like uniform opinions on the last couple songs, I have one question on this song. Do they stick the landing? Is this a good closer in your opinion?
I think it is probably as good as they could have closed it for the kind of album they were going for, in my opinion. My opinion about a lot of albums is that like I feel like bands are really, really good at writing a good couple of songs, like a good handful of songs, and then like all those other songs that they write just kind of fall by the wayside, which may not be their fault or anybody's fault. But I think Ceremony for this album, they wrote a good handful of really good tracks that I'll always remember. I'll always want to go back and listen to. As far as the ending of the album, I mean, do I scroll to it and play that track immediately? I don't. The one thing I want to say about the understanding that I think is very just particular, just reading through like the little Genius lyrics and stuff. He's talking about how, because I never liked this line where he says, "Baby, say that it's over." I feel that's kind of like a little cliche for a punk hardcore band,
Yeah.
But then reading why he wrote it, talking about like that was the midst of my big breakup, and they were still talking all the time, and he just kind of like pleaded with her, like, hey, like seriously, like, can we please end this? Like, I need it to be over to like move on with my life. I thought that was an interesting dynamic, and I actually didn't know that about the song until now. So I kind of have more respect for the track,
Yeah.
and I'll probably go back and listen to it with new eyes now, or at least new ears.
Mhm.
Yeah. Arnold,
I
do you think they stick the landing?
um I'm gonna say no because the fact that that because it's like when I heard the song and it ended, I just was like, "Oh, is that it? Like,
Hmm.
is that the end of the album?" So I'm gonna obviously say no because of that. Because I wouldn't like, because if it was a good ending, I would have been like, "Damn, like, all right, like, cool." Like, I was kind of expecting another song to kind of trudge through after. So doesn't really stick the landing musically, but lyrically, you know, it makes sense to have the title "The Understanding" at the end, having the first few lines talking about like that things have changed. So it does make sense, like on paper, and if you're an English teacher, it's like, yes, this is the final chapter. Uh, so, but I'm gonna say no.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely agree that it did it was an underwhelming finish to the album. I feel like an album's closer is a very important song. Like you kind of
Yeah.
have to end it on a high note, or if you're gonna end it, in a very quiet and subtle way, it still has to have some like emotional depth. Like one of my favorite album closers like ever is No Closer to Heaven of the Wonder Years No Closer to Heaven album.
Hmm.
It's like an acoustic track that wraps up all the themes of the album. It's emotionally powerful, and musically it may not be the most like overblown fucking extravagant finish, but it does signal like the end. It sounds like the end. Whereas The Understanding, I didn't really get that until I read into the lyrics, or until I looked into the lyrics. I got the feeling of like, oh, okay, yeah, this kind of wraps up the themes of the album. So I'm
Hmm.
also gonna say, yeah, it didn't really stick the landing on this one. Um, let's do the last Raymond
Well,
check-in.
well, maybe they didn't stick the landing because it's like just like a breakup is kind of just like it's like this the next day type thing.
Yeah.
It's not really like, all right, here it's done. All right, move on. It's kind of like weird. So no.
Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
That's definitely
Maybe they're trying to
a
convey a
point you could
feeling
make.
of a relationship.
Yeah. All right. The last Raymond check-in, at least for individual tracks, The Understanding. How do you
Separate
feel about what you've heard?
separately, I probably wouldn't listen to it, but as a to listen to the whole album, of course, I would listen to it. But from what I heard, doesn't sound like it's that's the thing that really bothers me is I think that albums really should end on a really good note, or not good note, but like uh, Francisco said, either a high note or a very if they're going a low note, make it really good. Like my personal favorite for one of the best or one of my personal favorite endings is on Pinkerton. Whenever they finish out the album with Butterfly, which is just this really quiet acoustic song with Rivers singing by himself. Um, so yeah, I really am a firm believer that you do need to end on a high note. And from what y'all say, it doesn't sound like it necessarily hit that.
Hmm.
All right. Okay. So that's the Raymond check-in on The Understanding. So now that we have discussed the album track by track, let's talk about why is the why do you guys think this album is an important album in the current musical landscape? Like what kind of changes do you think this album brought about when it comes to uh, the music scene at this point? Like what is its place in the scene's history, if you will?
Well, so for me, I mean, like I was saying earlier, I feel like this was sort of that turning point for a lot of hardcore bands, or even just pop punk bands. Like they all sort of started changing their sound. Um, Maybe not necessarily to be more marketable, but to I guess be more like counterculture, more punk. I guess like because I do think when Ceremony talks about being a punk band, they mean it in the most broad sense possible. When they're talking about their older albums and stuff, like they call themselves like, oh yeah, like we wrote some punk songs and stuff. They don't say, oh, we wrote some power violence songs. I don't even know if like when they first originally started, power violence was like a genre at the time that they first released their stuff. So as far as this album, I think this album is important because it does bring more people in. It does invite the idea that punk can be pretty much anything, and that even if you do write, a sort of post-punk album, and I don't know if you guys have listened to their later stuff after this, like even getting into what the album that came out last year, like In the Spirit World Now. I mean, they're still a totally different band, but if anybody asked me, hey, like, what kind of band is Ceremony? I'm going to say they're a punk band. Even though their new album sounds like they collabed with like Devo or something like that. But I mean, I think the L-Shaped Man was good. I think it was good for the time that like hardcore and even just like the scene of hardcore was in, that they were changing because it was growing so rapidly. This was a good album for them, especially the fact that if you guys go back and watch any of the videos from This Is Hardcore, they're playing these songs with it, and people like still love it just the same. Like there's like this utter respect for these guys who like they did the hardcore band, they did all that other stuff, and if they want to write songs like this, I mean, who are we really to say that they shouldn't be able to? Because if they started a whole new project, would we like this project less? Like if they were called by a different band name instead of being the Ceremony that we've known for 5-10 years or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
that's my feelings about it.
All right. Yeah.
Well, I will say that this album was on my list of top 10 albums of the decade just because of what, like just like you said, they did the most punk thing is doing something that's not punk, and they're still labeled as punk just because it's um, a different take on things. I will say it's a good album because of the fact that it makes people who are diehard fans listen to something else. And sometimes in the hardcore community, you can kind of be stuck in this same like breakdown riff, chuggy shit. Um, and some people just seek out brutal things, or like, oh, this is not as hard. Like, I don't want it. But this kind of forced listeners is like, hey, us as this band who does hard shit. Like, you listen to us do this, and it kind of changed a little bit of the dynamics of the hardcore scene. Like now you're seeing bands like worry about how they are instrumentally. People that are more dynamic are more popular. It's not the whole like breakdown here, like riff here and breakdown again. So they did turn the hardcore community, I think, on their head, while still being punk. It is the album that Ian Curtis couldn't give us because he died too early. But that's kind of also their flaw because it feels like at times a superficial, like post punk. But I will say I like this album uh, as its point in history, but I don't like this album by itself. So I'd say I'm gonna rate it like in two different categories. One's as a solo album, and one as like an album as a part of the Ceremony discography. That's how I kind of see it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I do. I agree with the points. I do. Like I said this at the beginning. My initial thoughts on the album. I do love it contextually as what it means to Ceremony to do, an album that went completely against the norms of what was expected of them or what their listeners wanted them to do. You know, people did. I remember Zoo, as excellent as it was, I remember that album being pretty polarizing too. Even though, if you think about it, especially now looking in hindsight, uh, that was a very compromising album. It still had its moments that like they gave the fans their heavy moments and like their punk moments. It wasn't just like a completely different monster the way the L-shaped man was. And as far as its place in the scene, um, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it wasn't like the first album to do this because I know like a lot of bands were doing. We're going through a similar trajectory, but it definitely feels like they were the ones that got to it first. Like we heard the L-shaped man, and then Title Fight came out with Hyperview, and it just seemed like a lot of bands were getting we're exploring a softer avenue. Like I don't know if any of y'all listen to Hundreds, but they went from like
Yep.
like this kind of metal core-ish sound to also doing a post-punk album.
Yep.
And like I said, I don't know if you can trace that like directly to Ceremony, but it does feel like Ceremony were like the ones that kind of broke that door. They were the first significant release, I think, from a band that was formerly known for heavier material to just completely, you know, completely, forego that for a softer sound. I remember I saw Hundreds at Warp Tour, one of the last Warp Tours, when they had just released their post-punk album. I think it was called Vertigo or something like that. And
I think it's called Rare.
yes, it was called Rare. The song that
Yeah.
my favorite song off of that album is Vertigo.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were playing nothing but songs off of Rare, and at one point they actually asked the crowd like, "Who here was expecting us to play something different?" And the people that raised their hands, they were like, "Well, you can get the fuck out because this is all we're gonna do." And I was like, that's pretty punk rock. Like that's some
That is
punk
punk.
shit. Yeah,
Yeah.
to be like, yeah, we're not gonna do what you're here for. Like you can complain all you want, but we're really digging this stuff and we're gonna play it. So I think that is a very good encapsulation of what this album means. I think we did kind of hit the nail on the head on it. I really enjoyed talking to you guys about this record. Let's do one final Raymond check-in. Raymond, overall, we went through all 11 tracks on the album.
Yeah,
Is the L-Shaped Man an album that you are going to be checking out?
for sure. It's probably going to be what I listen to right after I finish this call. I'm a big fan of punk albums, and I love post-punk specifically. So I feel like this is going to be an album I'll enjoy, and I'm really looking forward to it.
All right, dope. So,
yeah.
A round of ratings.
Round of ratings. Okay, yeah, let's do a round of ratings, starting with Alex. Rating, numerical. You could go any scale you want. Ratings for the L-Shaped Man.
Okay. So the way I judge albums is based on how many good songs I would say that like I would listen to on it.
Mm-hmm.
So saying I think there's 11 tracks on this album. So
yes,
we'll just say like 1 to 11. I would say there's probably about 6 good songs. So a 6 out of 11 I think is probably fair. 6 really good songs that I like will always go back to, or always never skip when I'm here when it comes on in the car. And then also this is just like a little piece of trivia about the album. The name of the album, The L-Shaped Man, kind of bothers me just a little bit, because there is like that movie term or the TV term they use, the L-shaped blanket, which is like, just Google it and you'll find the Urban Dictionary definition for it. But I want to understand why it's called the L-shaped man.
I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah, because I mean it's definitely worth it. It is interesting because it is something you've seen 100 times in movies. You've seen it 100 times in TV shows. And that's the L-shaped blanket. So what is the L-shaped man? What is that supposed to mean? Like what dynamic is he trying to convey here? So I think there is just a little mystery around the name, and I kind of like it, but I also kind of like wish there was more explanation. But yeah, 6 out of 11.
Mm-hmm. So that roughly translates to 54%, if I'm calculating.
If our math is on track.
Yeah. 0.4, 0.54, 5.4. I'm gonna say.
All right, okay, whatever, Arnold. Just give me your rating.
I'm gonna give this album 2 different ratings. One, I love Ceremony. They're always gonna be near and dear to my heart. I'm always gonna show a sign that I love Ceremony because at South by Southwest, at their death match, I did get like a stitch, and my whole lip was hanging off from the pit, and I had to go get stitches for that, about 5 or 6, and that experience didn't hurt my feelings towards Ceremony. If anything, that helped it show appreciation towards Ceremony. As a discography, as an album, as a part of this discography, I'm gonna give it around a 7, 7.5. I would say 75 out of 100. As a solo album, as if this is just a band's first album, or this is the only thing I've ever really listened to, or this is the only thing they've ever released, I'm gonna say this is like a 4 or 5, so like a 40 or a 50. So maybe call it a 45 out of 100, just because it's a post-punk band that kind of just ripping off a little bit of Joy Division. So it's kind of murky, very lukewarm. So I'm gonna say, I'm gonna give it those 2 ratings.
Fair. I would give it I would possibly go for a 5 out of 10. I do feel like the album does kind of suffer a little bit from a lack of diversity in some of the tracks. Like I said, some of the tracks do kind of bleed into each other for me. Sonically, it's a beautiful album. It sounds great, except for maybe the drumming on the pattern. But it is a a sonically great album. But just when you put all the tracks together, it does become kind of tiring to listen to. And like I said, I hate the fact that my favorite song on that album, in my head, sounds so similar to another track on the album that it just I can't enjoy it on its own because it sounds so much like this other track. So that kind of weighs it down for me. I do wish it was a little more diverse. As a band's first, foray into post-punk, you could definitely do way worse. But I just wish there was a little more to it. I would rate it higher if it gave me a reason to rate it higher. I think it's a perfectly serviceable album, but it does fizzle out at the end, and that does affect it for me. I don't know if it sounds fair.
I agree with it.
All right, cool. So let's about wrap this up. We normally try to keep this at 90 minutes. We're going a little over, but you know what? This was a really fun discussion with you guys, so I do not mind that at all. Let's get into the plugs portion of the show. If you guys have anything to plug, I know Alex, you just released a new single under the good going name. You just released Paprika. I absolutely loved it. It has been on heavy rotation for me.
Wow, thank you.
If you want to say anything else about it, if you want to plug anything else about it, go ahead. The floor is yours.
So I just released that new song on Friday, and thank you so much for listening to it. I 100% appreciate it. So I released that new song on Friday, and I'm going to be releasing another new song next month and the coming months after that. So follow me on Instagram or Spotify, whatever you use, and just keep your eyes out for that. And there's going to be a whole bunch of more content from other projects that I'm doing. So you can be on the lookout for that.
Cool. So now let's go to our other guest, Raymond Cabrera. Raymond is going to be next week's featured guest. As we said in the beginning of this episode, we are going to be discussing Carly Rae Jepsen's pop masterpiece, Emotion. Anything else you'd like to plug, Raymond? Any upcoming projects?
Well, the only other thing I have right now is Acid Wax, which is what I'm really excited about. And actually, if you guys want to be on the show too, you guys are welcome to hop on. So Acid Wax is basically a radio show that's going to be on kzsm.org, and it's going to be a show where we bring guests on and they show off a vinyl. If they don't have a vinyl, they can just show off an album, and we'll listen to the most important tracks in their opinion on the album, and then we go ahead and go into a discussion over why they think these specific tracks are so important, and then we try to bring it into existentialism somehow. And the reason why it's called Acid Wax is because during during the show I will be taking acid, and so yeah, it's a pretty exciting little project that I'm doing, and that'll be every Wednesday at 4:00 on kzsm.org.
I'm actually going to be a guest on
Yeah.
that show. So I'm
You'll
really
be there
excited.
next Wednesday.
Hell yeah.
Next Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah.
So be on the lookout for that. What is the website they can listen to this again?
kzsm.org.
All right, you heard it here.
And you can also follow us on Facebook at Acid Wax. So yeah, that's about it.
Dope. And again, check out Raymond Cabrera next week on this very show. We'll be talking about Carly Rae Jepsen's Emotion. Now we've got my co-host here, Arnold. Looks like he's scribbling something. You have anything to plug?
I do have stuff to plug.
I'm excited about this.
Just one moment. I can plug that I have my YouTube channel, youtube.com/timebombvids. It's mainly just me fucking around on vlogs because someone said, "Hey, you can't vlog better than me," and I did.
Hell yeah.
Stay tuned for next week's album, Carly Rae Jepsen. I promise,
this is the best one so far.
I promise I'll try to do a better one. I just totally forgot that I needed to do it. I gave her a little bit of a hunchback.
That's good though.
But I gave her a dump truck of a butt. Yeah, just go ahead, Time Bomb Vids. Continue with us next week. We're gonna watch do this album.
Nice.
In case you don't know this, if this is your first time listening, or I don't know if we mentioned this to Raymond, every week Arnold will try to recreate the album covers from memory.
Yeah.
So we're hoping we're gonna have, all these masterpieces. So once more, this has been Hindsight 2020, a musical retrospective. We discussed Ceremonies, the L-Shaped Man. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Hung out with us, listened to what we had to say about these records. Hope you guys come back next week. We're still working on getting the audio only recordings of this into other streaming platforms, so you can listen to it as an audio only podcast. So bear with us, we're getting that done. And y'all have a great night. Thank you guys so much for sticking around and just hanging out with us. We'll see y'all next week.
Yeah.
All right.
Later.
Later.